Hello. The light is really bright here. My name is Scott Thomason. I'm the technical product manager for Ping Federate. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm surprised to see this many people in the last workshop of the day. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this. I have a lot of material I want to cover in the next 50 minutes. So I'm really going to plow through, and hopefully if you're new to Ping and Ping Federate, Ping Access, hopefully you're learning more about our solutions this afternoon. Hopefully you have a lot to take away from this session as well. Just can I get a show of hands, like who was in the other masterclass sessions with Ping, like the Ping ID one and the Ping one, and okay, a lot of people. Who here is already pretty versed in Ping Federate? You know a lot about Ping Federate and Ping Access? Not so much, okay. All right, so I'm responsible for technical product management for Ping Federate. So I've been with Ping now for about 5 years. Most of that time, I've been serving as a product manager for Ping Federate. We also have Mark Bosley in the front row here, who was supposed to help me with this session and didn't help me, and so I'm doing it myself. So just trying to lay that guilt trip on. But I'm going to cover both products. I did do a lot of the product management around Ping Access since its inception as well, so I can speak pretty prominently to that. What we're going to cover is, first off, an overview of federated access management. Then I'm going to quickly go through some topics and demonstrations. So we'll go right from setup and deployment, and then into single sign-on, access, and then applying MFA on top of this infrastructure. So it's going to be a combination of just some deployment architecture, some topics we talk through, and just demonstrations showing you how to get things configured, and then and looking at configuration that's already there and understanding what it means. So if you're already very versed in Ping Federate, I am going to be demonstrating things on using Ping Federate version 8.2 beta, which is brand new, available to customers. If you see something there that you'd like to try out and want to give us some feedback on it, then you can have that opportunity. But most of what I'm going to show is applicable to the current release that's available on our website, version 8.1. So our identity-defined security platform, probably you've seen this slide a few times today, is comprised of federated access management and federated identity management. Under federated access management, we have MFA, which is, of course, the Ping ID solution, single sign-on, which can be Ping Federate or Ping One. And then we have access security, which is where Ping Access comes into play here. Most of what I'm going to be talking about is around Ping Federate and Ping Access, but we're going to be layering on Ping ID towards the end. So if you were in the Ping ID session, you saw how that works. Maybe from a Ping One perspective, you're going to see how you tie that in if you're using on-premise infrastructure with Ping Federate and Ping Access in the mix. So the MFA portion, for those that weren't in the Ping ID session, you'll see that towards the end. There's a variety of authentication methods that the Ping ID supports. The marquee one that we really started with was this push notification swipe-based mobile app. So it does support a range of authentication options now, like one-time password through email and SMS and YubiKey support. And so lots of different authentication methods to support different user needs that you might have out there, depending on what device the user has or where they're located. Single sign-on portion of the federated access management solution. Again, this could be either Ping One or Ping Federate. Ping One is our cloud service. It's really strong in cases where you're dealing with a lot of SaaS integration. If you have a lot of cloud apps you want to connect to, we make it easy for you to federate with those SaaS apps. It's simplified configuration. We have an application catalog that already has like templates for how you connect to Salesforce, Google Apps, Dropbox, these kind of things, and has built-in provisioning to a number of these SaaS providers as well. Ping Federate is really more strong in on-premise integration and more advanced use cases where you're going to be looking up data from many different databases. You want to do advanced or chaining of different disparate authentication sources. You want to support other protocols like OpenID, Connect, and OAuth. That's stuff we have in Ping Federate today, and we have plans for in our roadmap for Ping One, but not quite there yet. And so if you're looking to deploy Ping Access, like where that comes into play, is more about access control around URLs and around web apps and APIs. There is a dependency today around Ping Federate for that capability. So Ping Access, we'll get into the deployment architectures for this, but if you need to log in a user through Ping Federate, if you need to get OAuth tokens for APIs you're putting behind Ping Access, you'll need Ping Federate for those services. So Ping Access, it's a centralized solution for protecting web apps and providing API security. So if you have mobile apps that you're looking to secure, if you're looking to log in users into those mobile apps and provide tokens to secure the call between the mobile apps and some APIs, so Ping Access can sit in front of your APIs to validate those tokens and apply further access control policies on top of that. It has an extensible policy engine, very easy to set up rules for constructing your access control policies, so we'll get into that a bit later. Lots of cool session management features to do things like session timeouts, session revocation, logout, of course. We did it in a way that it's really designed with scalability in mind to support hundreds of thousands of users in the system. With Ping Access, it is comparable to a web access management product. So for deployment architectures, you do have the ability to do it in a gateway-based fashion or an agent-based approach. So it could be a central proxy that you're using and putting that in front of web apps. You could also use agents, where you're putting agents plugins installed on web servers or Java app servers to protect your web apps and APIs. So, or you might have a mix of both, depending on your needs. And again, this complements Ping Federate's login, federation capabilities. I haven't called it out here, but also our OAuth capabilities. So really providing the protection in front of your APIs where Ping Federate provides the token services itself. Okay, now that gives you the quick overview. Here's what it looks like when you're deploying a few of these different capabilities. So for single sign-on and Ping Federate, you could just have Ping Federate deployed on-premise. So it is software you download and install, and we'll go through that setup process. You would first connect Ping Federate. Say it could play either an identity provider or service provider role. You download that, connect it to, if you're an identity provider, you connect it to an identity store, like a directory server or database where your accounts are. You can then use Ping Federate to provide single sign-on services to cloud apps or maybe on-premise applications that you have. Ping Federate can also provide service provider capabilities. So if you have business partners and you want to provide a federated login into apps that you're exposing to them, you can do so. We support SAML, WS Federation, a number of other protocols to let single sign-on come in and provide services for that. So that's kind of the high-level picture of what you would connect to and what you'd be talking to. Ping One, again, is very strong in SaaS app integration. So you could have Ping Federate connected locally to Active Directory or wherever your user store is. And then that would be a bridge up to Ping One, where maybe you're federating to these SaaS apps. And Ping One is what's providing the single sign-on capabilities out to Dropbox or Google or what have you there. So it might simplify your configuration that you're maintaining on-premise, and you benefit from the easier configuration model and deployment of our cloud offering. Ping One can also do some of the SP capabilities that Ping Federate has. So it's a little bit more focused in the protocols that it supports. It's more focused around SAML2, and it can also be integrated through REST APIs into custom applications that you have. So there is an API. So you don't need to code SAML in your applications, for example. You don't need to deploy an agent there. There's a REST API that you use to integrate Ping One into your target on-premise applications, and then you can provide single sign-on functionality using SAML and, to business partners that you might have. So that lets you kind of migrate these use cases up to the cloud if you'd like to lessen your footprint on-premise and the complexity that you're maintaining on-prem. So it's really yours to decide, which model you're comfortable with based on your security needs and your deployment goals. Access security, so how Ping Access fits in. Again, it has a dependency on Ping Federate. So Ping Access, you would stand it in front of web apps and APIs. You can deploy either the agents or the gateway or a combination of both. Ping access, there's some configuration to point it to ping federate, so it knows that, all right, for a web app that I'm protecting, when I come to ping access and I don't have a session there, it's going to know to send a login request to ping federate to get you logged in there through whatever identity store you have connected to ping federate, and then get you a session into ping access so you can access those web apps. How that happens, the arrow you see between ping access and ping federate, we use OpenID Connect for the login mechanism. There's some additional capabilities we've layered on top of OpenID Connect to provide the session management features you'd come to expect from a web access management solution. So there's some APIs we've defined between the two products. We're entirely open about that interaction, so we're not trying to lock you into this stack of components that kind of operate in a black box, but we give you the freedom where you can mix and match these components, and hopefully there's third-party components that speak the same protocols that you can introduce into this environment you're deploying. Similarly for agents, so we have agents for IIS and Apache, Java app servers, we're adding more and more over time to that. We've defined an open API for how our agents talk to our policy server. So that's something we've shared with partners and customers where there's a need to build an agent for a platform or web server that we don't quite support yet. All right, and I mentioned before, like, we are a very lightweight architecture, and all the interactions, they are open standards or API-based, and so that really gives you the flexibility to deploy some of this software. It doesn't have to be in your own data center on-premise, but you can use infrastructure as a service or private cloud technology to deploy bits of this infrastructure out to separate environments like this. So you might have an instance of the ping access gateway, for example, sitting in front of a web app that you have hosted in Amazon. And you might have other bits of ping access infrastructure on-premise. There is a periodic synchronization that happens through a REST API in your ping access cluster that would synchronize any of the policy information you have and the certificates that you've got set up and whatnot. So it's not highly coupled, and it doesn't really limit how big you can get the cluster. We are very light in how we handle session management and things, so it really gives you the freedom to deploy ping access where you need to, so you can apply the centralized access control policies and single sign-on services no matter where your application resides. Lastly, tying it all together, where we would fit in Ping1 and Ping ID, again, you could have that hanging off of Ping Federate, and maybe have your cloud apps, your SaaS apps, federated through Ping1. And Ping ID as a service is part of our Ping1 cloud, so that would be connected to Ping Federate, either as an adapter, which I'll demonstrate to you later, or it could be introduced sort of by policy when you're logging into SaaS apps through Ping1. We can apply a policy at that point to say we're going to force you to log into Ping ID before you access these particular SaaS applications. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick setup demonstration here. I've got it screen cammed, so I don't make any mistakes in front of a live audience. I have this setup screen cam that's going to show you how we can set up Ping Federate and Ping Access in just a few minutes. I do have it on fast forward to be honest about it, but you'll see from the number of steps and the experience, it's very easy to do. This setup experience, if you're an existing Ping Federate customer, I'm using our Windows installer for this. That's a relatively new thing that we've developed. We have a number of installation packages that are available now. So if you're deployed on Windows, there's a MSI installer. If you're deployed to Red Hat, we have a nice one-line Red Hat installation script that you can use. And we have the traditional sort of zip form factor of Ping Federate as well, where you just unzip it and you run it. As long as you have Java installed in the environment, it's very easy to set up. So with the Windows installer, it asks you a number of questions. First off, like what type of node are you deploying? There's a mixture of standalone or admin nodes and cluster nodes that you would set up as part of your Ping Federate cluster. It does ask you for some details about how you're setting up this particular Ping Federate node. So what are the TCP ports you want to listen on for admin requests or for engine requests? Where are you going to install Ping Federate? And then from that point on, it registers Ping Federate as a service. after it installs all the installation files. And I'm doing just a standalone node in this demonstration here. It gives you a link at the end of the installation process to the admin console where you configure the configuration to connect Ping Federate to your identity store or to your apps where you need to. So it launches into the web app, the web administration interface here. And first thing, you just accept license agreement. It does give you the option at this point, if you want to connect up to Ping 1. I don't show it in this case, but you can very easily connect it to Ping 1. You get an activation key from Ping 1. You copy and paste that into Ping Federate at this time, and it's going to automate all the configuration required to connect Ping Federate with Ping 1, so you can connect up your say, your Active Directory or whatever your on-premise identity store is to Ping 1 for SSO services. So in this case, we're just going to set it up locally. There's a license file you need to supply. It then steps you through a couple of simple questions about what's the URL for your local host, what role do you want to play, identity provider, service provider, OAuth, authorization server. I chose identity provider, and we have an optimized configuration here specific to Active Directory just to simplify that initial, what we call first mile integration. So to get you connected to Active Directory so you can authenticate users there and also enable provisioning from Active Directory up to Ping 1 if you're connected to it. So once you've done that, you just set up your administrator password, and you're done at this point. So that's within just a couple minutes, you've got Ping Federate up and running and ready to start connecting to your target applications that you've got. Next part of this, it's going to show you the installation of Ping Access. So Ping Access, it's going to ask similarly, what kind of node do you want to install for Ping Access? It's going to ask, do you want to install a standalone node, a certain cluster, admin node, or an engine node to service requests? Asks you some simple port information about where you want to listen for requests. Again, lays down the installation files, registers Ping Access as a service, and then within a couple minutes, you've got it ready to be configured to meet your needs. So it's going to, at the end, again, present a link to the admin console for Ping Access. There's an initial simple configuration you do inside the admin console. Just set up your first administrator, your license, import that. And then license agreement and your password. Okay. And now you've got Ping Access set up, and now really, they're two separate components at this time, but to help you connect Ping Access to Ping Federate and start to protect applications there and get a sense for what's possible, we have the Ping Access Quick Start application. It's a simple web application that shows you two use cases, a web access management use case and an API access management use case. It also comes with some installations or setup scripts that leverage our administrative APIs in Ping Federate and Ping Access. So it's going to automate the configuration required to connect Ping Fed and Ping Access. There are Python scripts that you run in the command line. It asks you some simple questions about where is Ping Federate, where is Ping Access, what are the credentials for the administrator accounts, and then it's going to automate all the configuration. So it does give you a couple warnings about certificates that are self-signed and untrusted at this point, but you can just accept those. Later on, it detects, it's a non-destructive configuration. It'll detect that I already have some configuration connecting Ping Federate to Active Directory. And it's asking me what attribute from Active Directory do I want to map into my OpenID Connect configuration to support, like, what is the subject of my user, and how do I pass that to Ping Access? So in this case, we pick just the username, and there's a descriptive name for the username here too. We'll pick the given name, and then that's all configured. So then at this point, we copy in the Quick Start app. We can deploy that anywhere in any Java app server. In this case, we deploy it onto Ping Federate's app server, just as a convenience mechanism. So you just copy this J2E app onto Ping Federate, and and then you have it all configured. So there's a couple little tweaks. So if you go and replicate this, if you download Ping Federate Ping Access from our website today and try it out, you will be able to reproduce these steps within a few minutes, as you've seen. A couple little points that you might trip up on. Because we're using self-signed certificates, and initially the certificates have localhost in them, you do have to tick a box just to bypass the host validation that we have in between Ping Access and Ping Federate. So you just have to make sure that's added. And as well for logout here, there's one setting you need to add for redirect validation to make sure that that's done as well. So pretty easy things to catch, so once you have things up and running and try it out. Okay, so then you have the Quick Start app, and I'll just show you that live here in my environment. Just restart my browser to make sure I don't have any sessions that I was testing with before. Okay, like I said, there's two use cases that our Quick Start application demonstrates. There's a Web Access Management use case and API Access Management. So with a Web Access Management use case, basically you go through and it's going to ask you to log in. So this is an application that's protected with Ping Access. The first thing it does is it checks, do you have a session? So by policy, you can say, I need a session before I get into this web app. And it's going to redirect you to Ping Federate through OpenID Connect. There's then a policy that kicks in Ping Federate that figures out how do I log in this user. In this case, we're connected to Active Directory. So I log in with Scott here. This is his Active Directory credentials. And I get a service unavailable issue. What did I do wrong here? Let me, okay. I need to contact my system administrator. I think what I've done here, let me just bounce my services here. Let me just try it one more time. It might be because I was switching between configurations. No, okay. Give me 1 second, I'll just restart the services. And remote desktop is crashing on me. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Something with, I was playing with a couple different configuration archives, so yeah, and that should not happen to you. I think that's just because I had some different configuration points where I'm start point, I have an end point, and for some reason I think the certificate trust got confused there. So I'll just start fresh again here, do a log out, and you can see I'll log in again. Okay, once you log in to this protected web app, all it does basically is it echoes the headers that it saw from the original HTTP request. And Ping Access, it's enforcing policy, making you have a session before you access the app, and it's applying its own headers based on the session information, the user attribute information that it has. So it knows that I'm Scott, so there's an X-user HTTP request header that's set. There's also this X-group header that's set. It says sales for the group. So that just gives you an idea. You know, I've protected this app, and it's able to send some basic identity information to the backend app. I can then also show you, since we are a sort of dual purpose application, we can also do API access management where we are protecting a REST API with OAuth. And for this, what we do is we first get an access token to call this protected REST API. To do that, it leverages, Ping Access leverages Ping Federate for those OAuth token services. We can, with this quick start, we can request an access token, it's actually going to redirect me to Ping Federate through an OAuth authorization request. I'm prompted to accept some scopes that it's requesting, so similar to like a Facebook case where it's asking for certain permissions. Me as the resource owner, I'm going to release this edit access scope to the client application. It's going to then, okay. Best laid plans. It's going to then give me the service available error. Let me just restart my browser again. Okay. All right, well, imagine that we're, I'm going to go through the configuration with you and just give you an idea of what was configured there. I think we're going to start the configuration from another point that I had to show you the more advanced use cases, and I think that's going to clear up the error as well. So I'll show you here what we've got connected in Ping Federate. So Ping Federate, we did connect that to Active Directory. So as part of the configuration in Ping Federate that I did that for the setup, it sets up what we call an adapter. That's how it bridges to a local identity store. So we've got an adapter, which is a very popular one called the HTML form adapter that presents a login page to end users. In this case, it wraps an LDAP password credential validator. This is a configuration construct in Ping Federate where it validates a username and password against Active Directory in this case. We can see that particular password credential validator. It does have details around, here's my LDAP data store where my Active Directory instance is. Here's the search base for where my users are. Here's the search filter. So this knows how to validate the username and password, and then that's just wrapped in that adapter to perform the authentication event. You take this adapter, like all the setup process that I just demonstrated, it maps that adapter through to an OpenID Connect configuration, and on the other side, Ping Access trusts Ping Federate. So we'll see there that it knows where Ping Federate is as part of the system configuration here. It knows that we have Ping Federate at this host and this port. It applies, to set the headers for that web app, it uses what we call an identity mapping. So it translates the attributes that we have. In the case of the form adapter, we have a couple attributes that are exposed by default. There's this username that we get, there's usable principal name, there's given name. So a lot of attributes you can just source out of that LDAP entry and then map them through. And on the Ping Access side, we can then take those attributes and map them through to an identity mapping that we have here. And you'll see like those attributes are available here as part of the mapping. And then you choose what header you want to map it into. And then that's going to feed it into that backend application you put behind Ping Access. So where that application is defined, you'll see we have two application entries in Ping Access. There's the API portion of the Quick Start, and then there's the web portion. And we see in the web portion here, with that, there's an identity, there's a type of application that you define. So in this case, it's a web app. You have a session configuration with that dictates like timeouts and policies around how long is a session valid for, how are we going to do the revocation checking. You then also, as part of the app configuration, you say, is this a proxy-based protected application or is it an agent-based? And then lastly, there's the identity mapping that I just showed you here and how we take the user attributes that we have from Ping Federate and translate those into headers that we're sending to the backend app. Okay. So that's the app definition. And then how you apply policy on top of that is through the policies configuration here you'll see that there's entries for the Quick Start Web and then the API as well. And we actually have a rule that's applied here. I'll show you more about this later, but there's a web session rule here that does simple evaluation about these attributes. And so in this case, it's actually checking, does that group information, does that group attribute that we have being fed in, does it match this value called sales? So it's looking for my group membership for sales before I'm able to access that particular web app. Okay. So that was the quick overview on the setup and the Quick Start application. Next, I want to give you just a taste of what you have to think about when you're connecting Ping Federate, enabling single sign-on across different applications. So we have what we call first mile integration and last mile integration. Our first mile integration in this case was connecting to Active Directory. And then the middle portion is where we support federation standards. So like SAML, WS Federation, OpenID Connect. So that's an open standard that you can connect to non-Ping Federate environment, a third party that speaks these same open standards. And then we can also play the service provider role. So we can receive those, we can speak those identity and access management protocols, let that SSO transaction in, and then we can map it to the target application that you have that maybe doesn't support these standards. So there's a last mile integration that you have some options on as well. So for first mile integration, in our case, like I mentioned, we use the HTML form adapter in Ping Federate. It's a very popular adapter that we have. You would typically wrap that around an LDAP PCV to validate directory credentials. You could use a Radius PCV if you want to talk to, say, a strong authentication server that supports Radius. So it's able to do simple username password or a challenge response-based mechanism for that. We also support out-of-the-box Kerberos authentication, integration with third-party WAM systems like CA SiteMinder, Oracle Access Manager, RSA ClearTrust. We can also connect to multi-factor authentications, like we can introduce PingID. PingID is an MFA solution there. Support X509 certificate-based authentication, Duo Security, Semantic VIP, RSA. So quite a lot of flexibility around how we can support those. We could also, for your first mile integration, you might also have a case where you want to accept federation protocol in, so maybe like a SAML SSO in, but you want to bridge to a different federation protocol, or just maybe the same protocol, but to an app that needs that protocol coming in. But due to certain limitations in that target app, you want to provide a federation hub between these two different environments. So we can translate between like SAML and SAML, SAML and WS Federation, SAML to OpenID Connect. So you have a lot of freedom in how you mix and match these different protocols. We'd also support social login. So that could be through our cloud identity connectors like Facebook, Twitter, Google, LinkedIn, et cetera. And if you have custom needs, a custom login system, that's where we have integration kits. We have language integration kits that are based around what we call OpenToken. We also have an ageless integration kit that's more of a REST API style integration that you could use. On the last mile integration option, again, you have a lot of flexibility here too. There's really two different sets of features you should consider for last mile integration. So it could be a federated SSO model where you're doing like an SSO operation into Google Apps or Salesforce. So you just want to make sure the user gets into the front door of the app, and then you just kind of stand back. So that's something that we can offer SP services around. There's a variety of approaches you can use to integrate these SP services into your apps. It could be simple as setting HTTP headers like we have for Ping Access. We have a number of integration kits for Ping Federate that can do that as well. But the Ping Federate integration kits are more focused around just getting you in, just providing the single sign-on, and then there's no real session management that happens beyond just like local to that application. It could be that you're doing a REST API integration, again, similar to the agentless integration kit for the first mile. You can do that on the last mile, so you're doing some API work in your app to integrate it. We can also do We have language integration kits. So like I mentioned before, for First Mile, we have a Java and .NET based open token integration kits available there. And then you could look at doing standards for how you'd bridge into that last mile integration into that target app. So it could be that you want to support OpenID Connect or SAML. Those are going to be slightly larger efforts, really. Like you could use third-party libraries that speak these standards, but the overall complexity is going to be a little bit greater than the REST APIs and language kits that we have already for you that are really providing a simpler interface for coding and enabling your app. So those are options available for federated SSO. If you want more of the WEM features around session management, URL-based authorization, like inline protection of that app, auditing around the requests, I haven't called it out here, but things like step-up authentication within your app where you're providing policy around certain URLs, certain conditions, then that's really where you should look at ping access. And we can bridge from ping access to that app, typically with HTTP headers, but there's also what we call token mediation where we can translate into a third-party token type. So if something's already expecting some other token, like maybe you already have a SiteMinder agent installed and you want to leave that in place, and we can translate to that SiteMinder agent, we can translate it to a SiteMinder token and feed that there, so you don't have to touch the app to have us start to provide access management services on top of that infrastructure. Okay, so I'm just going to change my environment here so I have another set of configuration already set up to give you a demonstration of a couple of different points. So I want to show you some configuration walkthrough for single sign-on and layering on access and MFA services. So we have this feature in Ping Access and Ping Federate where you can import configuration archives to start from a baseline configuration. So for Ping Access, I'm just going to import a configuration archive I already have. So do that here. And similarly for Ping Federate, I'm going to import my configuration archive. So I'll import the configuration archive. And choose the Ping Federate archive I'm going to start from, and import that. Okay. So I showed you the Quick Start app with Ping Access. That's more the inline. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on that. A lot of our Ping Federate customers, they would just connect to SaaS apps. And so how you do that with Ping Federate alone is you typically create SP connections out to those SaaS providers. So I have one SP connection already pre-created as part of this configuration. I'm connected to Salesforce. So here you'll see when you're creating a connection in Ping Federate, there's a number of things you would fill out. So things like where's the assertion consumer URL? What kind of SAML bindings do you want to use? So these are details that are really specific to the SAML protocol, where it's going to accept assertions and how it's going to let users in. There's policies around how am I going to sign the assertion, what keys am I going to use for that. So all that sort of is captured in this one SP connection here that really represents the trust you establish with that partner. So in this particular case, I have browser SSO configured here. Again, this is the sort of the middle part of that first mile, last mile integration. This is the protocol portion. But you have to tie it to a first mile integration. And so what do I have for that is I have a authentication. You have an authentication source mapping where how are you going to take that? Where are you going to force the user to log in, and how are you going to get them authenticated and then send them through? In this case, this is a relatively new feature of Ping Federate. We call it an authentication policy contract, and that's really a normalized contract about like all the different authentication sources we want to authenticate somebody in, and how do we get those attributes. So in this case, I'm getting, again, from that HTML form adapter, I have a policy that's really just going to take the form adapter attributes and then send those to enable SSO to Salesforce. So in my authentication policy, I've got that form adapter really mapped into my policy. And you can see, I'll do a test login here. With each of these SP connections, it gives you a nice SSO application endpoint where I can take this URL, copy and paste this into the browser. And this is really a trigger to Ping Federate to say, I want to start SSO, and here's the partner I want to go to. So I'll put that in. It's going to, I already was logged into the form adapter in this case. It's leveraging my existing session and then just SSOing me into Salesforce without asking me to log in again. Okay, so you can see on the Salesforce side, I'm logged in and as Scott here, and yeah. So, got 9 minutes remaining, so I want to make sure I cover the other portions here. We'll dive back into the access portion side. So I'll show you a little bit more about how we define policy inside of Ping Access and how we can then start to apply MFA on top of what we've got there. So we have the application defined inside of Ping Access. We have a session associated with that application. We have this quick start application. We have rules that are dictating how do we let the user into that app. There's also some auditing that happens under the covers. So when I go to access that app, it audits every request that's going through so I can see exactly what URLs every user went to, what apps they went to. So in the case of the Quick Start app, I'm just going to confirm here that I can still log into the Quick Start app after I've restarted my configuration. So we're going to try to log in here. Again, it logged me in seamlessly. I already had a session with the form adapter. So this baseline configuration, I've actually changed a couple things as part of it. So you'll see that the group information is really being sourced from Active Directory. That's something I've tweaked in my mapping here. And we'll look at the policy here. Oops. We see we have the Quick Start web app. And the policy, I've changed it so I don't have any rules per se right now. But let's say I want to restrict this application, so maybe it's only available internally. So I'm just going to disable one thing. I have a browser plugin that's forcing me to set X-forwarded for here. I'm just going to uncheck that. But I want to see that I've got Ping Access here. I'm accessing the Quick Start, and this is the source IP address. And let's pretend like this is the internal IP address that we have for this user accessing the app. Okay, so we've got 172.33.242. Now, let's say we have a policy where this application can only be accessed from inside the network. Okay. To apply that, we can take a rule inside of Ping Access. There's all these rule templates, like I mentioned, where we can take this policy as a sort of a building block and layer it on. So I already have a rule here that says for this internal IP address range that's defined in CEDAR notation, this is the required location of where we're going to allow login to come from, or where we're going to allow access to come from. So we could apply this on top of my web app. I'm just going to drag and drop that. It's very easy to apply policy. And now, if I refresh this, it should be, unsurprisingly, I still have access. Now, let's pretend I'm outside the network, and we can read the source IP from the client itself. We can also look at X-forwarded for headers. So if there's something in the infrastructure that's setting a secure X-forwarded for header, then we can take that as a source. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use a browser plugin to simulate it. But you would rely on your network infrastructure to make sure that this is set securely. So now I'm coming from outside the network, and then Ping Access has shown me that it's denying me access at this point. The audit trail, very exciting, I know. The audit trail would show you clearly that this is not allowed for this user, and it was denied by this policy. So it's just clearly like this particular policy assigned to this resource is denying access. Now that's not a great experience. You probably don't want to completely restrict access to these applications externally, right? We're trying to embrace for mobile users, remote users. Probably something you'd prefer to do is require them to use multi-factor authentication in the case if they're off the network. So to be able to support that, what we have in Ping Access is the ability to combine these conditions into what we call a rule set. So it lets you and or different conditions, and then you can apply that on top of your rules. So we could do, for example, I'm just going to pretend I'm on the network again here to make sure my success case works OK. I'm going to go back and refresh this, and we'll see that I can still access. OK. I'm going to construct a rule now against that web app where we're going to say internal or will require multi-factor authentication. So we've got a rule set here that I've constructed that says for any of this criteria, so the success criteria says for either one of these, so it's kind of ORing these conditions together, we're going to let in the user into this app. So in this case, it's internal IP address or MFA required. And the MFA required one, this is what we call an authentication requirements rule. We say here that the minimum authentication requirement is MFA. And that is translated back on the Ping Federate side, where earlier I showed you this authentication policy. We're calling it on Ping Federate, on Ping Access MFA. We're saying you need to have a MFA to get in. On our policy on the Ping Federate side, we're looking for an authentication context, a requested authentication level of MFA, and we're going to map that into not only the form adapter to log them in against Active Directory, but we'll also combine it with Ping ID. So this is how you integrate Ping ID with Ping Federate. You have an adapter in Ping Federate that is able to make use of our Ping 1 services for Ping ID. So you'll see that I have a Ping ID adapter here. It's very easy to configure. You download a properties file from the Ping ID services. Maybe Ron showed you a little bit about that if you were in his session. You upload that into your adapter configuration inside of Ping Federate, and then it configures the two to work together. So now I have my policy that says if it's going to be MFA, that means adapter plus, that means AD login plus Ping ID. So I will take that. I'm going to take that rule set that we've got, where it's internal or MFA. And I'm going to just drag and drop that on top of that WAM headers resource that we've got as part of the Quick Start web app. Okay. So now, when I go to access this, again, I'm internal still. My login session should be fine as is. I'm logged in with an authentication level, just username and password. That's OK because I'm internal. But now, let's pretend that it's the middle of the afternoon. I've got a long-lived session. Maybe this is a portal application where you let users be logged in all day, and that's OK. But I'm going to go over to Starbucks and work from public Wi-Fi. Probably your security policy is not OK with that session still being valid, and you want to make sure that they are using multi-factor authentication at that point. So I'm going to just kind of fake it, so simulate it that I'm coming from an external IP here now. And with that same active session that I have in Ping Access, I'll refresh it on there, and it's going to trigger Ping ID authentication. I'll approve that on my phone. And now I'm into the Quick Start app again. So that gives you a very quick run-by on some different capabilities we have across Ping Federate and Ping Access to provide single sign-on services to cloud apps as well as internal apps, and really shows you how you can start to layer on MFA across these apps. So I showed you one example where we're really doing this on a contextual basis based on the IP address, but you could just as easily do this on a sort of a blanket basis where we're going to say, all right, any login into this particular app, we're going to always require MFA. Or it could even be based on group membership to say, if you're in this administrator group, we're going to force you to do MFA before you get to this cloud app or this internal app we're putting behind Ping Access. Okay, so that's all the time I had. So yeah, we'll open it up for questions. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so the question is, when it kicks in MFA, if you have like post-data loss, and maybe somebody's filling out a form, is it going to preserve all that? Yes, we have post-preservation features out of the box with Ping Access. So any data that's posted is actually saved in HTML5 storage before the login event happens, and then after the login happens, it's going to repost that to the original URL you were going to. One other cool thing we do that other WAM products struggle with is URI fragments. So not everybody knows what that means. URI fragments are when you see like a hash at the end of a URL where there's like some sort of thing like that on the end. That's actually some state information that's conveyed to a modern web app. We can also preserve URI fragments that are usually not things that are sent server side to be able to be preserved during redirects and whatnot. But we save that again in HTML5 storage to enable that to be preserved. So the user's state information is maintained in these kind of scenarios where they're doing step-up authentication or they're in a session timeout experience. I'm sorry? Browser requirement for post-preservation? URI fragment? No, that should work well with, like we use HTML5 storage, which might sound like a modern thing, but that goes all the way back to IE7 or something. Is that right, Jim? IE9, okay. And I think that's like, even 9 isn't supported anymore. It's like 10 is like the baseline, I think now, right? Yeah. 11's a baseline, okay, yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yeah, in the back, yeah.
So what are the use cases for Ping Access rather than OAuth, for example, or OpenID?
What are the use cases for Ping Access?
Yeah, so if we have a choice to use one or the other, what's the underlying factor that helps us to determine which to use for which?
Yeah, so OpenID Connect, OpenID Connect we use kind of internally in Ping Access to connect to Ping Federate for login services. So that's more of a web app SSO use case. For OAuth, we can use OAuth as a way to protect REST APIs typically. So Ping Access would issue the OAuth tokens, and then Ping Access would be the one that really enforces like the validation of that token when it's presented before access to that API is allowed. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Ping ID integrates beautifully, seamlessly, and all that. What about something more like a Yubico or TP or something?
Yeah, question is, Ping ID integrates beautifully. What about Yubico, YubiKey, or other MFA solutions? Yeah, the same integration I showed here. So we have out-of-the-box adapters for a number of other partners. So we have a Duo Security adapter. Yubico, we actually support YubiKeys directly as part of Ping ID, so you can use those, and we can manage the token assignments to your users and whatnot. We have connectors for RSA, Secure ID. You can use X509 certificates. Really, there's probably about a dozen or more options you can use.
We also have a Radius PCV.
A Radius PCV, yeah. So if it's not something we have an adapter for, if that strong authentication product supports Radius as a means to authenticate users, we can do that as well. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yeah. How does it handle upgrades? Yeah. Question is that it's nice that we have an installer, but how does it handle upgrades? So our installer will detect, like right now, there's some improvements we can do, but if you are on the installer path for Ping Federate, if you started with an installer and then you install the next release of Ping Federate, like if you install it 8.0 with the installer and then you install 8.1, it will detect that Ping Federate's already there. And there's an upgrade utility sort of baked into the installer that will migrate your configuration from 8.0 to 8.1 automatically. So if you didn't use the installer today, if you use the zip to install Ping Federate, then the upgrader will not detect it. But that's something we're going to address in a future release. So, yeah.
Ping Access has a separate upgrade utility
Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a good afternoon.